Cool.
Hey, Scott Leese here with Richard Harris. Richard, I want to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Okay. I feel like it's well documented, and I've talked ad nauseum about how I got into sales,
Yeah.
right? And kind of the trajectory of my career. But I sort of know your story. I don't even know if I could tell it back to you, though. And I
Yeah.
don't remember you really talking too much about it out there in persona and the things you do. So I thought it'd be interesting to get kind of Richard's origin story.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of boring, but I'll be glad to share it. Maybe you'll find some way to spice it up. There's certainly some interesting stories, thoughts in there. Um, I went to college. Both my parents were in sales. My dad sold insurance. My mom sold radio advertising, cable television. My mom sold cable television when ESPN first came out. ESPN first came out. It was like on for 4 hours a day. Like that was it. Like that's how it worked.
She sold ad space for ESPN in the early days.
In the early days. And
Wow.
this was um, this was back in the day when you didn't get the local college games. Like you maybe got your local college game, once or twice a season. Like we'd get the Georgia Florida game. That kind of be it. Maybe a Georgia some other game, but that was it. It wasn't like where you had all these SEC networks. So back then, ESPN was running like reruns of the University of Alabama game. But everybody was wondering, well, who's ever going to want to go watch a rerun of that? We already know the score. Nobody's going to want to watch that football game again, right? But this is long, this is early 80s, right? Um, so I've been surrounded by sales all my life. Like that's the point of the story.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. I do need to interview my mom about being a
You
salesperson.
do you feel like you learned sales stuff, through osmosis and by being around them? Like, was it really like part of your youth and development?
Not the way that it is with our kids. Like I know you and I talk to our kids about what
Yeah.
we do,
Yeah.
and we teach them how to negotiate and how to, it's very different. So it was if I learned anything, it was very much through osmosis. That being said, as I went to college, I knew I just wanted to get a business degree. I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. I knew I didn't want to be a finance or an econ major. So I just was sort of, for lack of a better
Then
phrase,
why
lazy.
why business then? Why business?
Because I knew I wanted to be in some kind of sales, right? I knew I wanted to do that.
You
I
did.
think, and I should back up, I guess. My first real job um, ever, my first real job was at the Gap, folding clothes and selling, right? So, and I got got the big fat Gap discount. Um, so I was always sort of seasonably dressed. I knew all the colors. So
So
that was my first
exact
job at the
opposite
age
of
of
my life.
16. What's that?
I said this is like the exact opposite of my life. This is
Totally,
amazing.
totally. I'm telling you, it's boring. Like there's nothing exciting. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
No,
people.
it's exciting to me because it's so different from how I grew up.
So I had that job, and the appeal to that job was I was very rebellious about fashion in general. Like making me wear Sunday school clothes was terrible, right? Making me dress up like ad nauseum bad. I once went on a school trip to DC as a senior in high school, and my teacher was shocked that I wasn't wearing socks. And she says, "I'm going to call your mother and tell her that you're not wearing any socks." And I said, "Go ahead." She already knows. Like she's beside herself too.
So you go to Tucson, you go to U of A
That.
to get a business degree,
Yep.
right? You've already worked at the Gap.
Yep. So then I get to my senior year, and I never had a job in college, right? Like my grandmother made it so that I didn't have to worry about that. But I got to my senior year, decided I needed to get a job, and in my rebellious mind and youth, I said, I'm going to go back to the Gap because I can wear jeans and t-shirts after college. Like I'll go get a management job. That was
Yeah,
my desire, right?
yeah. I don't have to
Um,
wear a suit. Nice work. Yeah.
yeah. So I went and got this job part-time. It was right before I graduate. It was during the holidays, and we went through the holiday season, and I never took it seriously. And there was a chance to like be promoted to what they called a pace setter and to move in. They knew I wanted to be in management. They knew I was a college senior. Like, I sort of I've said all the right things, but I was terrible and I got fired. So I was
What do you mean you were terrible? You were terrible at selling clothes?
yes. Yes.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Why?
So they had the deal was that you had to sell two for everything you sell, you're supposed to sell two. If you sell jeans, you sell a shirt. If you sell jeans, you sell a pair of socks. It didn't matter. Just two items. That was the quota.
You
right?
couldn't upsell people.
I couldn't upsell people. I was too nervous about it. I also had an ego. I think this is probably the biggest part. I thought that I was in. I thought I already had the management job in the bag, right? I don't know. Maybe this aligns with how millennials feel sometimes. I don't know. And so they fired me, and I was devastated. Like, I remember to this day sitting there, and I told her, like, this can't happen. This is what I want to do. Is there anything I can do? Is there anything I can do? And she said, I'll tell you what, I'll put you on call, which basically means you sit around and you have to call 2 hours ahead of time to see if you can, if they need you to come in because it's busy.
Yeah, it's like being a substitute teacher.
Totally.
Yeah.
And they called me in like once or twice a week. And she said, look, you're going to have to step up. You got to memorize all the colors. You got to know everything that's in the product book about the product. You got to know it backwards and forwards. She said, I don't care if you come in early and do it or what, but I'm not going to pay you to go learn that because I already did and it didn't work. So basically she was saying, show up early and stay late. Right. And so I did. And I earned my way back in. She was really excited about it. They opened up a Gap Kids in Tucson. I got the management position there. I knew I'd always wanted to move to Denver, Colorado. Denver, at that point there were only like 15 Gap Kids in the whole world, literally. Like one was in Tucson and one was in Phoenix and one was in Denver and one was in maybe Kansas City or something. Anyway, so I got transferred to Denver because I wanted to go there, and it was all on my dime. So that's how I got to Denver. Long story short, decided to get out of retail, hated it. But I learned a lot. Like, I had a whole day one day where I interviewed like 30 people all in a day for a retail job, right? I had to deal with managing and scheduling and training people. I'm like 21 or 22 out of college. So
this is a really common kind of like entry point into the field of sales. I can't even tell you how many people I've talked to who start off in retail and move into like retail management, and then they're sort of like, man, I'm done with that, and then they move to inside or outside sales and more of non-retail kind of space. So you leave retail and you go to what space?
At this point, I was so naive and still so cocky that I was like, fuck this, I'm going to go wait tables and make more money than I will in retail. Right? You got to remember.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't know. I don't think I ever knew you went and waited tables in Denver.
And guess how good I was.
I bet you're terrible at it. Yeah.
I was terrible at it.
Yeah.
So then I called back and I actually went back I said, hey, I made a mistake. Could I come back? I want to be at this store though instead of that store. So I moved from one store to the other. And I really thought I'd be at the Gap a long time. Like for a long, for some reason I was just in love with that store back in the day, and so anyway, so I did that for a little bit while, and then I got recruited to go sell newspaper ads in classified sections for. I think this part. The cool alternative weeklies. Yeah. So, what was that?
No, it's less common now, but I remember when I was first getting into sales, there was a lot of people whose first sales job was like, selling ad space and stuff at newspapers in different cities and everything.
Yeah. And so so I work for, Denver Westward, which is, they had papers in Phoenix called New Times, and Miami and Dallas and Houston. And we were the shit. We were the internet before the internet came along, like literally. We were the burgeoning of the internet. And this is probably the single biggest mistake. But the best part is my mom doesn't even remember this. So this has to be like circa 1997, 20, whatever. My business card would get me into any bar, club, or any party I wanted to because I was working for the cool paper. And my mom calls me and goes, there's this company out in California, and I think they're they're making money selling something that looks like classified ads on the computers. And I really think you should go look at it. You know, I think it'd be a really smart thing for you to consider. And, you know, my mom's a stockbroker, so it's her job to pay attention to stuff. And the company she was talking about was Yahoo. So,
Oh, wow.
you know, and my response, right, because this part you do know about me, Scott.
Yeah.
Like, Mom, why would I ever do that? I work for the coolest paper in town. I love living in Denver. I'm not moving to California. I don't know what that company's going to do, blah, 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 right? Typical know-it-all Gen Xer at the age of 27.
Typical low-risk Richard.
Yeah, total. Whole other story for people to understand. So Scott appreciates low-risk Richard on occasion. So,
so how long were you an actual like AE, if you will, as a
classified guy?
Yeah. Before you make the leap to sales management.
I was there 4 years.
4 years, you were an AE for 4 years before you went into management.
Yeah. So, and what happened was I had quit. Well, let me see. So first they had me doing classified ads. Then they asked me to move over to what was called retail, which is the front of the magazine, you know, all the bars, all the clubs, all that kind of stuff. I used to sell all the stuff in the back in the classifieds, help wanted, all the smut, you know, all the alleged adult things. So I've got tons of stories there. I sort of called myself the pimp's pimp at that point because of the ads we sold. But so then I did that for about 4 or 5 years. They had me go over to retail, and then I quit because I was going to go get an MBA and decided that, you know, I wasn't getting promoted. 5 years in, no management. Come on, it's time to get out of here. Yeah. I went in, you know, did all my GMAT or whatever it was back then, and got into University of Colorado, Denver. Was going to go get an MBA. I turned in my resignation, and they wouldn't take it. They're like, you can't resign. I'm like, well, what do you mean I can't resign? Like, we got plans for you. I'm like, and this company was run this way. Like, it literally was run this way. And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Normally, if you quit, like, you're out the door in 10 minutes. Like, that's normal how it worked there.
Yeah.
And so they're like, all right, I'll just stay here. And I go back to my cube, and the owner of the paper, right? This guy's the closest thing I knew to a billionaire. He's definitely a millionaire. He's now in a ton of legal trouble. If you haven't ever Googled New Times and all that stuff, it's a fascinating story. He goes, Ricky. I'm like, yeah, hi, Jim. What the fuck are you doing? I'm like I'm sitting in a cubicle, right, with the owner of the company on the phone with me. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, Jim. Like, I'm just trying to go do this. It's like, you're not going to go to the fucking MBA. I'm going to get you a fucking MBA right now. And he says, look, we need you to go to Cleveland. We need you to go and run that classified section out there. We're not done with the deal yet, but I don't want you to leave. I need you to stay around. And I'm like, Jim, you don't move from Denver to Cleveland. You move from Cleveland to Denver. Like, you know.
No disrespect to all the Clevelanders out there.
Yeah, no. And so I you know, Jim's like, look, I know you want to get an MBA. I'll give you an MBA. I promise, you know. And look, if you don't want to stay out there forever, I hear you. You only be out there a couple of years. I promise. Now keep in mind that Jim Larkin, who's the founder of this company, I also was his son's college roommate. So I had a deep connection. You know, I've had holidays at the house, and, you know, there was that level of a stronger bond. And so I let them convince me to not go get my MBA, moved to Cleveland, started managing a team there for the first time.
How big was that team? How big was that team?
When I got there, it was 2, and I probably built it to about 8 or 10 at that point. And it was all, there was not a sales team. It was like an order taking team. Like, it was this ridiculous, like, whoever showed up, you know, they determined how much money they made for the week by the amount they collected, not by how much they actually billed in the newspaper, right? Like, just, it was all in a notebook. So I hope this isn't boring for people.
I think it's fascinating. I think people like to hear,
I'm
the story of how people got to where they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was, you know, this paper was the kind of paper where, you know, our company was we dropped in like stormtroopers, right? When we bought that paper, half the team quit. And literally like 4 days after I'd spoken to Jim Larkin, he's like, Ricky, how fast can you be in Denver? I'm like, I don't know, Monday. He's like, get out there. Like, everybody just quit. We need you to just go and like get the newspaper, just handle the ads. Like, I knew what to do, right? And so as much as I was,
you went from Denver to Cleveland, back to Denver like right away almost.
No, I went Denver to Cleveland, was there for like 3 weeks in a hotel, and then went back and got all my stuff.
Okay.
They literally, it's a weekly paper, so there are deadlines, and you physically had to lay out all the ad. Like, think about all those ads you might see where it's, every Thursday night there's bands, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and there's like 4 bands. Like, you got to lay all that stuff out. That's
why is the sales manager dealing with all that layout?
Come on, dude, really?
What the fuck? What do I know about the newspaper business? Maybe somebody out there can send me information that fills me in on how this stuff works.
No, you as a sales rep, you were the seller and the account manager because you had to have the relationships with these bars and clubs. You had to go out.
What does that have to do about putting the paper together?
Not put I had to write out what needed to go in the ad. Then they had a graphic designer type it into the computer.
Oh, sorry. So
yeah. I wasn't clear. Sorry. So anyway, and again, so I was sort of, a rock star hero there for doing that. Then I went into.
So how do you get into tech, into the Bay?
So then I crushed it there for a year, and they moved me to the paper in San Francisco.
So that brings you to the Bay,
right? With that newspaper.
Did you at some point realize like newspapers are like dying and going away, and I probably need to get out of this, or what?
Yeah. A couple of things happened at once. One was I realized how I felt like I was pretty stupid because and this is 99, right? And everybody had all their shares and their IPOs and their, the crazy stuff going on. And I'm sitting around here going, I'm peddling newspaper ads. So I felt I definitely had an imposter syndrome going on, particularly in this city. And then for lack of a better, I practically had a mental breakdown. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I think you've heard the story about how I woke up one day and physically could not get out of bed because I was so depressed. I had just been with that company, and we'd been grinding and partying. I mean, it was a 12-hour day. It was 7 to 7, and then we went out to bars 5 or 6 nights a week.
You're just burnt. You're just burnt out.
Totally.
Candle burning both ends. Done.
Yep. And I was also single. Here I was living in San Francisco, a straight male, had my own apartment. I could afford my own apartment, no roommates, and I had no real social life when it came to dating, which is a whole other issue of where my own self-esteem was. There were always sort of different parts of me. Work Ricky was always confident, happy, outgoing, jovial. Personal Ricky was scared shitless.
I think a lot of salespeople have that, whether they're ready and willing to admit it or not. But like, you walk through the door and you can comfortably go into character. Like, I'm Sales Scott now.
Yeah, totally.
I'm in character. Like, I got this on the man, and as soon as I leave, it's like, oh man,
I got nothing.
Nothing. Who am I? Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I actually started my journey for mental health and things like that. So from there, I went into running a sales team at a educational company in Novato, California, called the Learning Company. Got bought by Riverdeep, just sort of through some weird circumstances. Going through an agency, I got hired and fired in about 3 weeks, and I told them that, look, I asked all these questions. I am literally going to sue the shit out of you if you don't find something for me. And I think I scared the hell out of them, right? Because Scott knows that's how I like to do things. And all of a sudden, I was overseeing a team of like 30. Like, had never managed anybody that big, no team that big before, right? I think at most I'd done 12 and no sales managers. Now I had 3 sales managers and 30 reps underneath me, and there's 3 different sales teams. So that was a huge, huge win for me in terms of my capabilities. Did that for a couple of years, then moved into computer security because that job, it transferred the entire sales team to Iowa because the cost of selling salaries in Iowa was a third.
This is right around the time where we first met or knew.
No, this is still before you. This is before 5 or 6 years before you.
Oh, really?
So I literally had a team in California that I had to boldface lie to because they knew there was a team in Iowa, and they were like, "Are they going to fire us?" And I'm like, "No, they're not firing you."
Let me ask you a question. Would you, if you were right now in working in a company and VP of sales or whatever, would you boldface lie like that again?
God.
I wonder about that. I wonder if the corporate climate is different now than it was.
No, it's not. In fact, it's probably worse.
I don't know.
What's that?
I don't know. I don't think I could do it.
I disagree, because I think that at least in the world you and I are in the startup world, there's too many shares on the line. There's too much equity. We would never walk away from that equity on that piece. Right?
Well, I'm not exactly sure where you're going, but I don't know that I could just stand in front of my entire sales team and be like, "Oh yeah, all of your jobs are totally safe," and then 24 hours later they're all fired.
It was about a month later. It was about a month later. But this could be this could be a character flaw in Richard and I've heard this before, that I'm a little too loyal and sometimes I stay a year too long. Right?
Well, nobody's ever accused me of that.
Yeah, exactly. You're the opposite of me. You're the complete opposite, which is probably why we get along. So then I went to run a security team, computer security team, small team, learned a ton about sales, learned a ton about channel sales, learned a ton about the differences between software and hardware and computer world, and selling in different ways. Did that for 5 or 6 years, and then that company got embroiled in a patent lawsuit, which had nothing to do with me, and basically that company just bled the company dry. It's this company, Acco Brands, Kensington. I don't give a shit what they think, but I don't know who they own by now, but their egos were ridiculous, and they will make claims that are absolutely false and untrue about computer locks and inventing computer slots, but that's another story. So anyway, so that cost me my job. So that's why I don't really give a shit about this.
So the recurring theme here is like Richard has challenges with authority. That's what it sounds like.
But did I ever challenge your authority? I guess I did. So
yeah. But not not like over the top or whatever.
No, I agree with you.
That's gotta be part of why you work on your own now, though, right?
Right. It totally is. I mean, I think the way I describe it though is that's what it was like to be a Gen Xer. Was we were taught to tell authority. We came up post Vietnam. We were educated in the 70s around post Vietnam and not trusting the government and questioning everything. Then all of a sudden we were thrown out in the world as our own at the age of 10 as latchkey kids, having to figure it out. Right. I'm 10 or 11 years old and I'm coming home from school, calling mom to let her know I got home all right, and make myself a sandwich. Right. Like, could Braden do that? I don't know the Riley.
Yeah, my kids do that.
So anyway, so I think that you're right. There is that sort of angst against authority, and there's a certain level of entitlement that comes with it, at least in my mind. So it's not that unfamiliar. That's why I find it funny when people complain about millennials, because every generation is that way. Every 25-year-old person thinks they know more than the 30-year-old person. Like, that's standard life.
Yeah.
So, and after that, that's where I met Scott. That's where I had to, at the computer company, that when I got laid off because of the lawsuit and the money.
Well, the irony here is a college friend and college tennis teammate of mine, tries to like get you to hire me, right, to go work for, is it PC Guardian? Is that the name of it?
That's what it was.
Company? Yeah. And you, what did you tell him? You like, no way. I mean,
remember this.
We never even took the call. We never even.
I was like, this guy doesn't have any sales experience. Why would I hire this guy?
Yeah, I did have sales experience. You just like disrespected the 1 year or whatever, less than a
Yeah.
year.
But again, typical, I think I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
typical me. That's who I was at the time. Yeah,
Uh,
and I don't even remember that. That's the funny thing is I don't even remember that. So as I got laid off, I called this friend Tony that Scott's referring to and said, Tony, here's what happened. You'd worked for me for 3 or 4 years. You know of anything? Like I was, for me, it was like, oh my God, I was this guy's VP and now I'm calling him asking about any kind of
for
sales
help,
job.
whatever.
And this is 2008, right at the beginning of the recession, right? Like literally, I'd gotten married in 2007, had a baby in 2008 in July, bought a house in October of 2008, moved, and then in November got laid off. So all that pressure was on me. And that's when Tony introduced
There's some important lessons in there about humility, right? And about the power and strength of the relationships that you build, as a leader with your team, because you literally never know, the whole thing could be flipped upside down tomorrow, right?
Yep.
And the person who's working for me today could be my boss.
Yep.
And I don't think that a lot of leaders think about that and treat it with the right amount of respect.
Yeah.
And humility,
Yeah.
Wherever we're at, we could all get it taken out from under us at any minute,
Yep, exactly. And I think that's different now. I think, this sort of whole personalization in sales, relationships, but not relationship selling, right, is being taught in a better way than it used to be. So that I think that people would be more comfortable asking for this level of help. Again, my generation didn't do that, right? Like, that's not how I saw the internet, right? I wasn't using the internet that way, as opposed to this generation where it's like, oh, I'll just go watch a YouTube video. If I have to go do something, I actually have to go, oh my God, I could watch this on YouTube and figure it out. Like I have to have an epiphany. Whereas this generation's like, I'm just going to go watch YouTube. Like you wouldn't even think, you don't even need to Google it. I would have to Google it first and then go, oh shit, there's a video. I should watch it. Like I'm just not there, and so from there, I was making a healthy 6-figure salary, and a new house, a new baby, new wife. Not that I had an old wife before, just a wife, I should say, my wife. And I had to I picked up the phone, called Scott, had an interview with him. I think I was pretty aggressive through the interview process. I remember I emailed you, I left you a message, and I connected with you on LinkedIn all within about 10 minutes. Because I knew.
Which way did I get back to you, by the way?
I don't know. I think you emailed me back to say come in on this day or something like that.
I don't remember either. I'm just curious.
And it's a strategy. I could probably go find that email. It's a strategy I still teach people to do. Like you don't just go apply online. You apply online. Yeah. You find out who you think the hiring manager is. You connect with them on LinkedIn, right? You then even go to the HR department, find as high up in the HR department as you can to say, hey, I just applied to this. I'd love to figure out which HR person I need to talk to. I then tell you to go pick up the phone and call the hiring manager you think it is, even if it's through the front desk. Call and leave a voicemail for the HR person. So that by the time, I don't trust the machine is going to get them my resume.
You're like a bulldog trying to.
Yeah, but why wouldn't I be?
And a lot of people don't do that.
Most don't.
I don't know why.
Yeah, and I've written about it. There's a whole process to it, right? Like, look, particularly for sales, right? I am selling you. I got to show you I know how to do this. I want them to sit here because I know every single one of those people will be like, all right, well, he's a sales guy. He emailed me, he LinkedIn me, and he left me a message. Like, he knows the game, right? Yeah. And so,
so if we fast forward through the years that we worked together, and then you move on and you're VP of sales again, right? Like, at what point? And this is super relevant for me because I, have just stepped off the ledge and gone on my own now. Like, how do you come to the conclusion that, you're going to take the risk and go on your own, or what's going to be best for you and your family. You're going to be happiest, you know, doing your own thing and doing this consulting business. How did you get to that place where you were kind of done working for other people?
Well, I mean, truthfully, it sort of fell in my lap, and I think there's a pattern to this now. I could probably write the book, but the biggest fear most people have is, I don't know where my income's going to come from. And so what had happened was I'd gotten laid off, but this was because there was a merger acquisition going on with the startup I was at, and they hugged me out the door. They really took care of me and the family to make sure I had a very long runway. And I was interviewing like crazy and doing a great job, but I was getting to the fourth or fifth interview, but not closing the deal. And then ironically, someone called and said, "Hey, could you help do this?" And I said, "Sure." Came up with a number. Was going to Austin every week for 4 weeks. First week flying back, I sit down on the plane. Sit down next to this guy. Turns out to be Nick Maida from Gainsight. This is when Gainsight had 12 or 15 people. We started talking, having this great conversation. We got shushed by the flight attendant twice. We were talking so loud, and we weren't drinking. It's not like we were drinking at all. We were just having a nice conversation. Next thing I know, I kind of had another client. So all of a sudden I had these 2 clients, for 60 days that was almost worth 6 months in salary. And it was like, something, the world's telling me something. I picked up the phone. I called John Barrows.
So you had some of these things kind of come into place before you made the decision.
Totally. It found me way more than I found it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I called John, and John's like, "Well, I know you can do this." And he's like, "I can tell you, this isn't normally how it happens. It doesn't just happen that easily for people." So I took a couple of grand, threw up what I call a validation website, started making some calls, got another client. That got me through the end of the year. And I was going to decide, in January, do I think I need to hire, go out and find a new job or keep this consulting thing going? And I, to be honest with you, I never really had to look back. The consulting thing just continued to go and grow, and it was fantastic. And that's sort of my, that's, I'm sure there's lots of questions people could ask or you want to ask, but that's my origin story.
Yeah, that's good. I think you should share that story more. No, you think putting people to sleep, but my experience is that people really like to hear from others, like, how the hell did you get to where you are? You know, and there's nuances and struggle all over the place and mistakes, right? Like, you were, by your own admission, like, too arrogant at times. Like, you got laid off a bunch of different times. And there's probably listeners out there who have been laid off before and don't think that, they're ever going to make something of themselves because they think it's the end of the world. It's like, it doesn't really matter. It didn't stop you, right?
Yeah.
Look where you've gone now. And, sometimes a stroke of luck is necessary, right? So
is it? Yeah, but I don't know that it's luck. I stopped calling it luck. I finally decided that it's not luck. Is that to your point? This is the maturity stepping in, right? That everything I've done has prepared you for that moment, right? So that when that opportunity comes in, like, oh, I know what to do with this now, or at least I have enough wisdom to explore this more. At 20, whatever, I didn't have the wisdom to listen to my mother, right? Like, there was, like, if I'd have been like, oh, maybe I should just go talk to somebody over there. Maybe I'll decide I like it. Like, can you imagine in 1997, like, they would have flown you everywhere and you'd have been wined and dined and ended up in Silicon Valley, and, like, who knows where I would have been.
Well, you could have been selling ad space for ESPN for the last 30 years.
Exactly. I do have a friend who does that for Fox. But he's in Dallas, so at least he gets Cowboys tickets and stuff. So,
well, that's cool. I don't know. I don't think that many people know, your story, and so hopefully people get a kick out of hearing about it. Like I said, my story has been well documented before. So
yeah, I think because I compare everything I do to you in general. Right? Like, I'm like, well, my story's not as exciting as Scott's story. Not that I wish Scott had that story. I'd much rather you have my boring story.
Because my story is so fucked up.
Right.
Doesn't mean yours is not interesting. All right, bud.
All right, man. Hey, love you. Thank you so much for this.
Talk again soon.
All right. Bye.
Cheers.